My name is Angie Kiger, as Paul said. I have the opportunity to work full-time with Sunrise Medical. One of my greatest pleasures of working with Sunrise Medical is being able to connect and meet wonderful people. I'm actually based out of the Washington, D.C. area. I'm living about 3 miles from our nation's capital. And over the years, I've had the chance to meet, I like to call him a travel icon, but the one and only Cory Lee. So he's on here with me today. Cory, do you want to say, hey, what's up?
Yeah, hey Angie. Every time you call me that, I have like my ego boosts a bit. So thank you for that. But like Angie said, I am Cory Lee, and I'm a travel blogger, wheelchair user, and I have spinal muscular atrophy type 2. So about 7 years ago, I started a travel blog all about traveling the world in a wheelchair. It's called Curb Free with Cory Lee, and we'll delve more into that in a bit, I know. But I'm really excited to do this today with you, Angie, and I can't wait to see all the questions that everyone has at the end.
All right. So when we saw the Abilities Expo was going to be virtual, Cory and I were bummed because he likes to travel. I travel for my job, so we can't be there with you guys in person. So we were like, if we're going to keep people engaged, we've got to somehow make this exciting. So I called Cory up and I was like, how about instead of talking about travel, you've had a lot of experience in your 31 years. Let's talk about what it's like to thrive with a disability. Now, Cory gave his background as far as my knowledge and experience with individuals with disabilities. My cousin actually has cerebral palsy. She is 10 years older than me. I'm 40-ish, 43. So I often tell people that I have grown up in the wheelchair and assistive technology industry. Did not realize at a young age I was becoming an advocate, and really have had a great opportunity to learn a lot over the years, and really kind of catapult me into my profession. So I know that you guys are anxious for us to get to it and talk about, what are some of Cory Lee's tips. I like to say this is going to be a little bit Jimmy Kimmel mixed with a little bit of Oprah Super Soul Sunday. Do you agree with that, Cory?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a good description.
All right. Cory, can you give us tip number 10?
Yes, I can. And I do want to say these tips are in no particular order. So they're kind of all over the place, but we'll have fun doing it. So, number 10, I would say that life is not a series of pass and fail tests. So, it's important to be very transparent no matter what you're doing, I believe. So, being vulnerable as well and like completely open with everyone, whether it's your family and friends or therapists, physicians, because honestly, I mean, nobody's a mind reader unless they're a psychic. So, and whether I believe in those or not, I'm not entirely sure. I did meet a psychic once in India, and he was phenomenally like on the dot and knew every detail. So now I'm more of a believer, actually. But yeah, some interesting experiences there. But I think, with me being as vulnerable as I can be about my disability and about, all the little aspects that traveling as a wheelchair user entails, it enables others and like my followers and readers to my blog to really understand in depth what all goes into that process. So instead of, glamorizing my travels, I try to be very vulnerable and speak truth to it. And I think that that's really important, no matter what industry that someone is in, just to be as honest and open as possible.
Absolutely. And speaking as someone who has made my career working with individuals with disabilities and attempting to match those individuals to the best technology, I can tell you that, be as transparent and as vulnerable as possible. I was recently talking with another good friend of mine named Jenny, and she went through the wheelchair evaluation process about a year ago, and recently got her new chairs all set up. And I was asking her, what were some of the key things that you brought up during your evaluation? And she said, well, considering the fact I sustained a spinal cord injury about 9 months of age when I contracted transverse myelitis, I really have become familiar with just telling it like it is. She said, I told them everything. And so Cory, would you agree, even when you're doing your wheelchair evaluations, you need to be, in technology in general, as open as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, even to be honest, again, and vulnerable, when I was younger, I maybe tried to like gloss over parts of my disability and not be as open with it as possible, to appear, I guess, like less disabled. When I was younger, like internalized ableism to some degree. We could do a whole
Mhm.
topic on that, by the way. But now, I mean, whenever I do meet with my like wheelchair provider, Henley Medical in Chattanooga, Tennessee, I'm really as open as possible with them to make sure, that my wheelchair is going to fit my needs and be customized for me exactly as it should be, for sure.
Absolutely. And remember, all of your healthcare professionals are under the HIPAA agreement. So they will not be, telling your stories or anything like that. So that's for, for the professional side of things. I had to jump in and make sure that we talk about wheelchair evaluations a tad bit. All right, let's keep rolling. Cory, tip number 9.
Number 9, I would say that it is very important to incorporate self-care into your life. So, whether that means, going to the spa and like getting pampered or not. I mean, I think that really self-care is anything that puts you in a positive mindset. So for me, maybe that would be something like, traveling to a destination that I've always dreamed of, or I'm a bit of a foodie, so even like going out to dinner at a really nice restaurant and having like wine, drinks, the whole ordeal, like that's something that I enjoy. So that would be part of self-care to me. So I think self-care, it can mean so many different things. And I think that as people with disabilities, we go through a lot in our everyday lives. So I mean, I think it's okay to, treat yourself. I always like tell myself like just treat yourself, like it's okay, you deserve it. And I think we constantly need to remind ourselves that we do deserve to treat ourselves.
Absolutely. When you say self-care, I got a little bit anxious there, Cory, because I was like, oh gosh, people might think you're talking about their activities of daily living, or and might be thinking, well, man, I can't physically take care of myself. But any advice on if someone has limited mobility like you, and or doesn't have, the finances at the time? I know you've talked about how you've definitely worked very hard for your money and had to grow to where you were. So there have been times where it's been lean, but if you can't go to your favorite travel destination, what are some other ideas?
I mean, I think now, I mean, in the pandemic, and even still, I mean, now that we're kind of seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, finally, thank God. It's never been easier to participate online. So even, like here at Abilities Expo, I mean, doing this today, I mean, I'm really learning a lot from other people and trying to gain knowledge. I mean, this is even a form of self because it's helping me mentally, just hearing everyone else's stories. So self-care can come in all different kinds of forms, but especially virtually even. So, whether you're going out and spending $100 on a good meal, or you're just doing something virtually that is free, it can all have the same mental impact, I believe.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there's our like little Super Soul Sunday tip, I guess, for you. We're channeling our inner Oprah and Brene Brown. Speaking of which, I'm a big Audible person, Cory. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I take my dog for a walk, it's not even about fitness or letting him relieve himself. I'll pop in my earbuds and listen to some Audible just to kind of get away from whatever stressful experience I've been going through.
I need
So.
to say Audible. I'm a big like fan of self-help books, and I've read
Mhm.
many, but I've never done Audible, so I need to give it a try.
Big fan, especially when you guys are doing those road trips, for sure.
Right, for sure.
All right, so we've done 10, 9, of course, 8 number is next. What's number 8?
I think it's one of the most important. So I would say to build the support system that you need. So
Ooh.
whether that means, like hiring a really good network of care attendants to help you in your everyday life, or just like friends and family, I think that it's incredibly important to have a good support system. And they say, I've always kind of like grown up with this quote, that you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And so I try to make sure that those 5 are people that I like enjoy being around, like you, Angie, you're one.
Well,
So
thank you.
Yeah, so people that I just, like really enjoy being around, have a positive energy about them, and, building that support system. And also, I mean, care attendants, especially. I mean, as someone with a disability, I know that finding a good care team is a process. I've definitely been through the ringer with that many, many times. But I think, if you stay persistent, you know what you want, which we'll delve into in a later point here, then having a really good care team can go a long way.
All right. Well, because I'm, work with Quickie and I talk about wheelchairs and I'm a very passionate therapist about making sure people get the right technology, I have a follow-up question for you on that. Cory,
Okay.
how, you talk about care team and whatnot. How do you recommend people build a team as far as recommending equipment? Like, how did you do that? I know you also recently went through the new wheelchair process. I think your new one was delivered last fall at some point. I remember I was excited to see that sweet green color on your Facebook page.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, really from a young age, I started with a good team at a local wheelchair repair company and supplier, Henley Medical in Chattanooga, like I said earlier. And I started working with them and have worked with them ever since I was 4 years old. So, we've been open and honest and vulnerable about all of my needs with them throughout, since I was 4 years old. So I'm working with them today, even, and like this year, and getting a new chair just a few months ago. That's important as well. And I mean, they're a really phenomenal company. They know me, like I'm a good friend. As soon as I go in that store, I mean, they know me by name. They know what I need. I mean, they know what type of chair I want. Always a quickie, of course. That's kind of my only requirement. But
And we appreciate that, Cory. That is something I think some people, excuse me, have thought over the years, maybe have wondered, does Cory Lee, he does stuff for Quickie. I will go on the record. Cory Lee has actually gotten all of his shares through insurance. We didn't even know when he was updating this last one. So we
yeah,
appreciate
yeah.
your love and loyalty.
Yeah, of course. I mean, since the age of 4, I've actually used a quickie. So I've never had anything but a quickie. And I mean, I think they're really good chairs. I mean, I'm really glad to, do this workshop today with Sunrise Medical and with you. And yeah, I mean, it's awesome.
Thanks, man. We appreciate that. Definitely. All right. So tip number 7 for thriving.
Okay, I would say number 7 is to be intentional about connecting with people that you can relate to. And so when I talk about this, I think about, like when I was younger and even like 10 years ago, I really didn't know anyone else with a disability closely. I didn't have any other disabled friends and kind of grew up without, people that I could really identify with in the disability community, unfortunately. And after I started the blog a little over 7 years ago, I started meeting more and more wheelchair users and people with disabilities that I could actually relate to. And this really helped me because finally, whenever I had like an experience, whether it was something related to my disability, I could just like question them and they've been through the exact same thing. And so, having that firsthand knowledge is incredibly important and helps me, again, I think mentally, thrive and really understand all the aspects of disabled life. And so, I mean, I would say, whatever your disability is, be sure to connect with others that can relate to that for sure.
Absolutely. So do you have any advice for someone maybe who was, we mentioned you mentioned with your disability, it's a congenital diagnosis. So you've lived with SMA your entire life. What about somebody who's newly injured and they spent the first 20 years of their life without any disabilities, and then something came along, an illness, an accident, or what happened, and now they are feeling very isolated? Any recommendations for how they can connect with folks like them?
Yeah, I mean, there are all kinds of really awesome support groups, but one of my favorites is like Facebook groups. So there are there's like a Facebook group for everything, I feel like. So
That's true.
anytime I'm like even a little interested in something, I'm like going to join a Facebook group and connect with other like-minded people. So no matter what your disability is, probably, I mean, there is a Facebook group for that. And I've formed some really good friendships from that. And even on Clubhouse, which like a new
I've heard
social
about that.
app. It's like audio based. It's a brand new social app. There are a ton of disability rooms, and I run a club in there called the 15%, and it's all disability focused. So if you ever want to talk about anything related to disability, definitely jump on Clubhouse, and yeah, we can chat all about it.
I have not, actually never been on a Clubhouse. I've heard you mention it before. Is it pretty easy to navigate? Like,
It's my favorite. I mean, as far as like
okay.
accessibility goes, Clubhouse does have a long way to go. So it is audio based. So for the deaf or hard of hearing community, there are some features that do need to be drastically improved, but that's something that we're constantly fighting for. And we're talking with the founders of Clubhouse within the 15% club to get understand the need for better accessibility. So it's something they're working on, and hopefully soon it will be fully accessible.
Cool. Very good. Very good. I had another question. Oh, I know another question, another comment. I know looking through some of the Abilities Expos in person and also looking through the virtual ones over the years, there have been a lot of organizations, just a lot of cool people in general that are, with the Abilities Expo family. That's been kind of neat for me, because I remember my very first Abilities Expo was back when I worked at the pediatric hospital in DC. And it was at a smaller venue it's grown over the years, but I can just remember wandering through there and seeing patients I knew and meeting people that I actually still talk to today. It was just really cool that, that community vibe. And for me, I'm looking for other therapists. I'm looking for other people that, are looking to do more with technology. And so I found my people there. So it's kind of cool, groups like the Abilities Expo. And then also, Cory, when I think about people connecting, kind of in more formal ways, is like diagnosis-driven support groups too. Like our local chapters, like the Cure SMA Virginia, one of my good friends from elementary school, we grew up on the same street, her niece has SMA type 1. And so their family has gotten very involved in Cure SMA Virginia. And they've said it's been a lifesaver for them as they've learned about their daughter's diagnosis and been able to introduce her to other children who are experiencing the same thing virtually and also in person. Obviously more in person pre-pandemic, but
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I mean, I'm really thankful that now there are so many resources, because when I was growing up, like there were nowhere near as many. I mean, we didn't have, or at least that I knew about, like Abilities Expo back in the early 90s. And it was kind of a free for all back in those days, and now there are just so many resources that make it a lot easier. So I'm really thankful for all of that.
Well, I think, I know we say this a lot, but I definitely think that you and also the lady behind the wheel a lot of times, literally, is Sandy, your mother. I think you guys have trailblazed a lot. And I'm sure there are lots of moms and dads out there that are thankful for your mother. So Sandy, if you're watching, shout out to you. You are an amazing person and have really helped a lot of folks, build this community with Cory too.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I'll tell her for sure.
And I love her dance moves. Like, I feel like if she's on TikTok, maybe I need to follow her. Okay.
She is on TikTok, but let's go to the next question.
All right, let's talk about tip number 6, Cory. We're going right on through this list.
Okay, number 6, I would say to know that if it's been done before, then it is possible. But as a wheelchair user or a person with disability, you may need to get a little bit creative. So whenever I was starting out blogging, I researched a bunch of other travel blogs. I knew, there were hundreds of travel blogs out there and a few related to accessible travel, but not very many. But I knew that if all of everyone else could start a travel blog, then I could do it also. I may just need to do it from a different angle, from a wheelchair user's perspective. And so I had to get creative, in pitching things like press trips and trying, I always have to travel with a care attendant. And so that's something that a lot of tourism boards had never really worked with. And so they were used to hosting only, the travel writer, which would be me, and then no companions with them. And so it's kind of like, double the cost if they're hosting me and the companion. So that's something that I had to constantly fight for. But I knew, if I just, let them know you know, how valuable it would be to, you know, let me visit the destination, write about the accessibility and how huge the accessible travel market is, then they would be more willing to host me and let me visit their destinations. And so in the beginning, that's something I had to constantly fight for. But now, luckily, a lot of destinations are finally realizing how huge the accessible travel market is. And so things are better now. So I think, you know, no matter what it is that you're doing, I mean, it's been done before, so it is possible, but just feel free to get a bit creative.
Now, a side of you that you don't often talk about, you know, in your travel blogging is, I think back of, you know, when you've talked to me about when you were going to college and whatnot, how, like, think back to Cory 20 plus, 20, not 20 plus years ago. Oh, I just aged Cory.
I'm not that old.
You are not, but, you know, back when you were pondering college and whatnot, any advice for folks that are, have any sort of disability that are thinking they want to, kind of broaden their education and maybe either go away to college or take college classes? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, so when I graduated high school, I actually moved to Washington, D.C., to where you live. And I went to George Washington University and spent a year there. And that was a big process because it was like a 10-hour drive away from home. I was moving to a totally different environment. And even when I moved, 2 days later, I ended up in the hospital from pneumonia. And so there I was, like 10 hours away from home for the first time by myself, living independently. And then I became hospitalized within 2 days. So it was definitely a rocky start, but I did end up graduating college. I ended up transferring, moving back a little closer to home to the Atlanta area, and went to college there and graduated with a degree in marketing in 2014. And so the college process, mainly the hardest part, I guess, was like finding care attendants and people that I could really rely on for that, you know, everyday care that, you know, showed up, were willing to, you know, drive me to class or to wherever it may be, and still having, you know, a fun college experience in that process of being a boss essentially, and trying to manage care attendants. And so at years old, you know, I was like young and dumb, but I made it through and eventually graduated, but definitely to get very creative along the way, and learned a lot in those years. More than I would have liked to, probably.
But I'm guessing, you know, as you said before, if it's been done before, you know, then you know, kids go to college. I say kids because my niece is actually headed off to college next year. I mean, they go to college all the time. Also, adults go back for college. You know, I actually had a friend in graduate school who was an attorney, and he was injured and ended up with a high-level spinal cord injury. Please excuse the dog banging on the window. He wants to be let outside. I apologize. Anyway, I digress. So when after his spinal cord injury, very high level cervical spinal cord injury, and he decided to go back and get his master's in assistive technology because he was a practicing attorney who had never thought about like what people with disabilities go through, what technology is out there. So we learned a ton from him of just, you know, as being students without disabilities, learning about assistive technology and kind of those experiences. And he said going back to school was one of the most intimidating things he'd ever done because he didn't realize that there was so much technology to allow him to access his education.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's totally possible to even go online, you know, but when I was going through high school, there was a girl that went to my school. She was in a wheelchair, had cerebral palsy, and she moved off to college. So I knew, you know, like if she did it, then it's definitely possible. It's just going to be a little tricky. But yeah, made it work, made it happen. So yeah, anything's possible if you have enough determination, I think.
Gotcha. We'll have to talk offline sometime about some of your crazy college stories. We won't get into it now because it's a little bit of a professional forum, we'll say.
Yeah,
so
let's not make that public information.
All right. We won't record it. Speaking of that, it's kind of funny. Actually, I got a preview of Cory's list, so I know what's coming up next, and I didn't know this when I first looked at this, Cory. So number 5,
Okay, so number 5, going along with the college theme, I would say to always make sure that you have your ID with you. So whether you're like going to a movie or out for a drink or whatever, definitely have that. And this is more of like a funny point, but it has a good point to it. So whenever I am out, usually like a lot of waiters will actually look at whoever is dining with me, like if I, especially if I order a drink or something, like an alcoholic drink, and they'll look at them like, is he allowed? You know, like, can we get him? Or they'll look at them and even say like, you know, what would he like to order? And so they just assume, you know, just because I'm in a wheelchair, like I shouldn't be drinking, or I shouldn't, you know, or I can't even order food or eat. So that has happened to me actually a few times within the past even like 4 months. I was in Key West just this past November, and at 3 different restaurants, they looked at my companion and said, "What would he like to order?" And I was like, it's happened to me throughout my whole life, but it was like during that trip, it just happened like back to back to back 3 times in a week. So it was wild, but I can definitely order my own food and I can definitely drink. And so when that does happen, I just get like really loud and obnoxious. And I'm like, I would like to order, and just like say it as loudly and as obnoxiously as possible, just to get the point across and like kind of get on their nerves.
Nice.
Yeah, and one more point I would say on a serious note, to tell to that it, you know, even if you don't drive, that it's very important to have an ID with you. So some people with disabilities that maybe don't think about that. I think especially, you know, if you're younger, then you think, well, you know, I'm not driving, so why would I need an ID? But it is very important to actually have that.
You know, I think about that when, and I know we talked about this the other day, but when this would have been sometime in the 90s, my aunt and uncle were taking a trip, and my cousin Susan was going to go with them, and they were headed to Las Vegas. And my aunt thought about it at the very last minute, was that, oh my gosh, we're staying at one of those places that has a casino. We can't leave Susan in the room. And she called ahead and said, hey, you know, what would happen? You know, we want to make sure we can bring our daughter in. She has intellectual disabilities. She won't be gambling. My husband and our other older children will, but just kind of want to check. And they said, she has to have an ID. And I remember my Uncle Ralph, who was a very vocal man, to say the least, before he has since passed away, but he just could not understand why Aunt Bonnie was like, we have to go to DMV. And they're like, Susan's not going to be driving. What are you talking about? And so, and back in those days, this was the 90s, mind you, security for airports were a lot less. And so they would actually vouch for Susan and she could fly. But that was a huge deal. And so always reminding folks that, hey, be sure to get a state issued or government issued ID. That will save you a lot of headaches here and there. And I was, Cory, as somebody who is 12 years older than you, it's a sad day when you stop getting ID'd for alcohol. I still remember where I was when I didn't get ID'd at a liquor store, and I was like, what? What do you mean? Don't you want to see my ID? I don't look so young anymore. So
well, now when I don't get ID'd, I'm like, oh, like finally. But yeah, and maybe in like 10 years I'll have a different feeling about that. But yeah,
it's true. Yes. Much older than you, my friend. Much older than you. We're doing really well on time because I know Paul asked that we save about 15 minutes to chit chat with some people. And I've got 4 cards left here. So we've got 4. So I don't remember what's next, and I haven't scrolled down to see. So let's go with number 4, and let's see if we can come up with like a fun story we can relate to this one. So what is number 4?
Yeah, so number 4, I would say to always have a plan B or even a plan C or D, so in some cases. So as a wheelchair, whenever I am doing anything, I mean, something seems to go wrong or take a wrong turn at some point in the process. So nothing is really going to go 100% smoothly all the time. So it's always very important to have a plan B. And I learned this when I was actually 18 and I went to Germany. It was my first time ever in Europe, first like long international flight. aside from like the Caribbean. So I flew to Germany, got to the hotel, and went to plug my wheelchair charger into an outlet. And I even had like a converter, an adapter, all of the necessities. But as soon as I plugged it in, it actually blew up and like sparks were flying. It was a whole ordeal, and I never expected that to happen on my first in Europe.
That's a lot different than when I blew up when my first European trip when I was a teenager, and it was my crimper. Now it's a big deal back then when you blow up your hair crimper. I had those before I embraced my natural curls, but I did used to crimp my hair, had the nice big poofy bangs too. So I thought that was devastating, but it sounds like yours was a little bit more important than what I blew up.
Yeah, I mean, when it blew up, I mean, I was freaking out because I knew like I was going to be in Germany for the next like 10 days and I could not go without a powered wheelchair for 10 days. I mean, that's not possible. It would not be fun for me or anyone traveling with me to push me around those cities. So the next day, I got online, found a wheelchair repair shop that actually sold a wheelchair charger that the one that I needed, and I went and bought it, and it was like 250 euros or something, which was more money than I wanted to spend, but I had to buy it, to have a good trip. But now I always have a plan B. So whenever I'm traveling, before I actually even go, I'll look up wheelchair repair shops within that destination and write them down, take that with me just in case, I'm on the plane, if the airline, damages the wheelchair or the charger blows up or whatever it is, I have a repair shop that, I can call and get in contact with easily. So always good to have a plan B, no matter what it is.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Flights and wheelchairs. I know you have many stories you could tell about that, but I think
a whole session on that.
We could do the terrible things, the top 10 terrible things that happened to Cory Lee when flying. But I think about that because I can remember we have an advocacy conference that McKaylee actually works for NCART. I've talked about her before, Access to CRT group. We had a conference here, and I remember one of the end users who utilized a wheelchair. He was coming in to do some advocacy and never flown with his power chair, and it was severely damaged. Now, the running joke was, if you're going to have wheelchair damage, the place to actually be going is to a conference that has people who fix wheelchairs for a living. Right. But that's not always going to be the case. So definitely research before that happens. And I think about that with, what about Cory? Let's throw some other, crazy things out there. What about if your current wheelchair, breaks down when or not breaks down, but battery dies, that sort of stuff? Like, what are some other like plan Bs? Any tips?
So this was another lesson that I learned. I went to Disney World when I was like 7, 8 years old. And at the end of the day, my wheelchair died on the opposite side of the park not at the entrance, but on the opposite side of the park. And so my mom had to physically put my chair in manual mode and push me out. And if you've been to Disney, you know how massive those theme parks are. And so now we always take, if we're going to Disney or planning a long travel day, I'll throw my wheelchair charger in my backpack and take it with me. So then if I'm just sitting down at dinner or for lunch or whatever, then I'll just charge it while I'm eating. And that's plenty of time to just get it charged up a little bit so it'll last through the rest of the day. And so that's a good lesson that I learned at an early age.
Cory, one of my bucket list things I've never told you is, because you and I are both big Disney fans, I feel like we should do a Facebook Live, Cory and Angie explore Disney.
Let's go. I'm ready. You say
I've also have a speech therapist friend of mine that loves Disney too. And once the coronavirus hit, we decided when everything opens up again, we want to go to the Paris Disney. Have you been there?
I have not, but Tokyo Disneyland is at the top of my bucket list.
Oh man,
I'm dying to go there.
Yes. I'm also a very big Disney fan. So one day, Cory, we'll end up at one of the Disney theme parks, preferably like Tokyo or Paris, but we'll go together and we'll make it a fun time.
Yeah,
All right. Tip number 3.
Okay, tip number 3, I would say that it's important to know when to say yes, but also equally important to know when to say no to opportunities. And so, when I was like starting out in the blogging field, travel blogging, I thought that I had to say yes to every opportunity. And I did for the first couple of years. And then I got like so burned out from just saying yes all the time and trying to juggle a million different things that I got burned out. And I like then spent a few months where I wasn't even like posting anything. I kind of like almost gave up on blogging, like wanted to just it to end and be done with it. Because I was burned out. And then after a few months, I started like getting messages from followers and readers, and they were like, "Hey, where are you? Like, why are you not updating?" And so I went back into it after a couple months, and have been at it ever since. But now I know that it's okay to say no sometimes. So don't try to do everything. I mean, nobody can do it all. So it's important to be selective sometimes with opportunities, and even, really good opportunities. I mean, some awesome opportunities have came my way that I've said no to just because I was already juggling, too many different opportunities and things to do. So, I mean, it's okay to say no, I would say.
All right. Well, you keep speaking my language when I keep relating it back to wheelchairs and technology and advocacy, because I'm a big proponent for that. One thing I always like to remind folks of who utilize any sort of complex rehab technology, wheelchairs, standers, Hoyer lifts, anything that, any sort of assistive technology, it's always consumer choice. And I know, Cory, you have bragged on, and I swear, I think sometimes you might be getting some marketing dollars from Henley Medical, although I know you just truly believe their family. But sometimes I hear this from end users is they are really told what equipment that they're allowed to explore and to look at. So I often tell people, know when to say yes and when to say no, and it's okay to say, I don't necessarily agree with the recommendation of said brand, said set up, whatever. I would like to explore some other things, take a step back. Have you ever experienced that, or have you had friends who've kind of been through that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this goes perfectly into our number 2 point. So,
oh, shoot.
Yeah, if you want to hold up the sign. Yeah, so number 2, I was actually going to say to be your own advocate. And you should know every detail of like your care and equipment. So this ties in perfectly, I think. But, I think, when we are, getting a new wheelchair or dealing with any issues related to that, it is important to really advocate for ourselves. And, if we know that there's a piece of equipment that can really improve our lives as someone with a disability, then it's important for us to really stress that and know the laws and regulations regarding how we can get that equipment. And so for me, the travel field, I know the Air Carrier Access Act like the back of my hand. So it's a set of rules and laws that airlines have to abide by when dealing with passengers with disabilities. And so knowing that whenever I'm flying gives me like more ease of mind and makes the whole flying process better. So I mean, I would say just don't be passive, really drive your care and be as much of an advocate for yourself as you can be, no matter what your age is. So even when you're younger, I think it's okay to be an advocate then also. Just know what you want and make it happen.
The other thing that I have admired about you, because I know when, I don't know, it was a year or two ago, where we were seeing a lot, or actually it was more recently than that, a lot with the airlines. There was a specific airline, I don't want to say the name of it, but that was, saying that, hey, we're not going to be able to allow individuals with disabilities, with power chairs to travel short domestic flights because our planes can't handle it. Sorry. And one of the things that I admire about you is, it's not even about using your platform, like, because you do have a lot of followers. It's just in general, you seem very passionate about advocating for everyone, as opposed to, for me, advocacy is educating, say, the waitress or waiter that is not giving you eye contact when you're trying to order a beverage. But then also, the bigger picture, right? Like, I mentioned a little bit kind of to the side. And I believe that Paul, when he pops back on, when I mentioned the name McKaylee and Incart, he knows her in that organization. They're very big on advocacy for helping folks in terms of getting access to complex rehab technology, which is the wheelchairs that you're measured for and specified directly for you, and technology in there. And I have to say that the biggest voice, because I've been on Capitol Hill, and I'll tell you, the people who actually look at us and the more likely that a congressman or congresswoman is actually going to speak to us as opposed to their legislative aide is not me, who works for a company that makes wheelchairs. It's the individual, it's their constituent that is using that wheelchair that's going to have the bigger voice. So I know it's cumbersome, but really getting involved in call-in days, sending emails to your representatives, and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think, traveling, it has really given me a lot more empathy. And so now, I mean, I think it's also important, this could have even been a point to be a lifelong learner and just be willing to, learn about other disabilities and how we can advocate for people with other disabilities as well. So, I mean, as far as like we were talking about Clubhouse and advocating for the deaf and hard of hearing community, when it comes to apps like that, that's something that I've recently been learning a lot about, and just talking with and messaging with other, people in the deaf and hard of hearing community, just trying to, learn their firsthand experiences and perspectives. And that's something that we can all do, is just be willing to be open and learning about those experiences.
Absolutely. All right. Last but not least, number one, we said these are in no particular order, but number one on Cory Lee's top 10 on thriving with a disability is?
I would say to set goals early on and pursue them relentlessly. So even if it drives like your friends and family bonkers, like just pursue them relentlessly. So when I was, starting out in the blogging field, I had an idea of what I wanted the blog to be about, but not like 100%, but I knew what I wanted to do, and I have worked at it every single day since then, minus those like 2 months where I kind of got burned out on it. But aside from those 2 months, every single day for the past 7.5 years, I've worked on it. And now it's finally at a point where I do have the ability to finally like say no to some opportunities and turn things down that just don't feel right or don't mesh well with my blog. So, I think, we all need to have a goal. I think goals are very, very important, no matter what field we want those goals to be in or what field we're pursuing. And then just, be adamant, devote an hour to pursuing that goal every single day. And in 7 years, there's no telling where you're.
Man. All right. Well, so I look back at these and I wish we had a way, and Paul, maybe we'll have to think of a way for us to like publish these and like share them somewhere on the Abilities Expo's platforms. But, when I look at these, Cory, they're funny enough, we titled this Thriving with a Disability, but this is a lot of good advice for anyone, in my opinion. I mean, your one about goals definitely hit home, for me. Incorporating self-care, I'm a bit of a workaholic. So was there any sort of underlying message that maybe I grabbed, by pulling at straws, but maybe people with disabilities aren't that much different when it comes to making goals and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the entire point. So could really be applied, whether you have a disability or not. These are things that we should all be doing, and they can help all of us, hopefully. So yeah, I'm glad you noticed that.
All right. I'm sorry, because I don't feel quite as silly, but okay. All right. Well, Paul, I know that we 15 minutes is what you said to have for questions. Did we do okay?
You did great. You did fine. All right, Cory, you were just smooth, man. I just want to say, man, you're just like the smoothest dude, in the disability game, man. The way you just handle things and run through things. I do have a question that someone posed to. They got in a little late and they were wondering if you can do a quick run through of the list for people who missed the beginning. If you can do a quick run through, Cory.
Yeah, and thank you for that nice comment, Paul. So number 10 was life is not a series of pass or fail tests. I'm just going to read these. So it's not going to be fancy, sorry, but life is not a series of pass or fail tests. So it's important to be transparent and as vulnerable as possible. Number 9 was incorporate self-care into your life, no matter what that self-care may look like for you. Number 8 was build the support system that you need, whether that's care attendants or friends and family. Build a really good support system. Number 7 was be intentional about connecting with people that you can relate to. So if you have a disability, connect with other people with that same disability, because it's important to really share those firsthand experiences. Number 6 was know that if it's been done before, it is possible. But as someone with a disability, you may just need to get a little creative with it. Number 5 was always make sure that you have your ID when going out for like adult beverages or anything really, because a lot of people frequently look at whoever's dining with me. If I order a drink, is that okay to do? So that was just like more of a funny tip, but also important for everyone to have an ID. And then number 4 was always have a plan B, maybe C, D to also. Because as people with disabilities, nothing is ever really going to go 100% smoothly. So it's good to have a backup plan all the time. Number 3 was know when to say yes, but also when to say no to opportunities. Number 2 was be your own advocate. And whether that's dealing with like care and equipment or issues related to disability, just advocate for yourself constantly and for others as well. And number 1 was set goals early on and pursue them relentlessly.
I love it, Cory. I should have had a drum roll for the last one. My bad. Next time we'll get some drum rolls for you and everything. But that's cool, Cory. Thank you so much. Here's another question now, Cory. How involved are you in coordinating your personal care attendant? And do you have advice for recruitment, interviewing, maintaining boundaries?
Well, so I could talk about this a lot, but I'll try to make it quick. I, always meet with care attendants. I've interviewed a lot, and if it doesn't feel right from the get-go, it's not going to be right. So, at the very beginning of the interviews, if it just feels a little off, then I know it's not going to go well. And so just give it up at that point, move on to the next one. There's no sense in trying to make it work when it's not going to work. Trust me. I've been there, done that many times. But now I do have a really good team that is consistent. I can rely on them. My primary care attendant has worked with me for like 9 years, I think. So, and she's like my age. We were friends actually before she became my care attendant. And so she's worked with me for the past 9 years and is phenomenal. Another one I was actually friends with also before she became my care attendant. And so, I think this isn't always the case. And sometimes it's hard to establish a boundary between, them being a friend, but also, taking care of me and me relying on them. That's a boundary that you've got to really perfect. And luckily I've had a lot of experience with that. So I've kind of learned how to handle that over the past 13 years since I turned 18. But yeah, it is completely possible, I think. But I think, it's just important. The main thing whenever, you're interviewing potential care attendants to really ask the right questions from the get-go. So be open with them again and very, very vulnerable, as we've talked about a lot in the past hour. And just being as vulnerable as possible lets them know what to expect. And then also having a mutual respect for one another can go a very, very long way. So I respect them, they respect me, we treat each other as equals. And, that really has helped me a ton, I think.
That is some great advice, Cory. And especially for parents who are interviewing caregivers. It's important for them to really articulate that too. I've heard of some horror stories where caregivers won't even cook for you know, for us. And I'm sitting up there like, they'd have been gone yesterday. If they don't feed me, they're out of here, you know?
I've had some horror stories now. I mean, if anybody wants to hear them, feel free to message me on Instagram. I'm at curb free Cory Lee. I can tell you all about it.
All right. We're going to check it out, because if anybody do you wrong again, Cory, Angie and me are going to go take care of them for you. All right. Just let us know. Okay.
Yep.
We got
For
you.
sure.
Here's another question, Cory. What is the travel blog's website?
So my travel blog is curbfreewithcorylee.com. And I'm also on Instagram at curbfreecorylee.
I like that. You know, that rhymes, Cory. We can turn that into a song. We got to get you a theme song. I'm going to work on that for you, okay?
That's a brilliant idea. I can't wait.
We'll do it. Here's another question, Cory. How do you get non-disabled people to respect your boundaries?
To respect your boundaries. So I think just being, again, open and honest with them and letting them know up front what those boundaries are. So when it comes to like care attendants, I mean, just from the get-go, I mean, you've got to be open and honest with care attendants especially. So yeah, I mean, same as the other answer, I would say, just being open, honest, and vulnerable.
Awesome. So running over their foot don't work anymore, right?
Right. Usually not. I have done that a few times, but I haven't had the best results.
Yeah, me too, Cory. Almost got really roughed up one time doing that, so I'm not going to do that no more. All right, Cory, here's another one. What is your favorite place you've traveled and why?
Oh, this is always like the toughest question, because I think each place like has its own unique features that like I fall in love with. But if I had to pick like a top three, I can't pick one, sorry, but I would say Morocco, India, and Antarctica. So Morocco was somewhere that I like never really even considered visiting. But then when I went there, I was like, why have I never been here before? It's like the most incredible country. And India was somewhere I always wanted to visit, but it was never possible because there was zero accessible transportation in India until just a few years ago. And so now there is a company called Enable Travel, and Enable Travel does have accessible transportation now. So I finally visited India a couple of years ago, and it like blew me away. It's sensory overload in the best way. And then Antarctica is just like somewhere, it's been a lifelong dream destination for me to visit all 7 continents. And when I went to Antarctica, actually last year, like last February, right before the pandemic started, it blew me away and like, I mean, surpassed every expectation that I had.
So in Morocco, did you have authentic couscous there?
I did. We had couscous. We ate in the tagine for like every meal. I mean, I'm not the hugest fan of Moroccan food, sorry, but it was, you know, it was part of the experience, and it's an amazing country.
Or it was like, find me a Burger King or a McDonald's. Let me
Right.
get
Okay. I don't know, because I ate at a Burger King in India, and let me tell you, it's not Burger King.
You got the real Whopper, right?
You get something. I don't know what it is.
Okay, we got about 2 more minutes, and Cory, someone asked, have you ever been camping?
So I have not like camped in a tent, but I did go on an RV trip a couple weeks ago. So with Winnebago now has wheelchair accessible RVs, and I was able to use the Winnebago Inspire AE RV. And I went along the east coast of Florida, visited a few different campgrounds, and the RV had like a full lift on it. And I think Winnebago like a sponsor of Abilities Expo. So like head over to their booth, definitely check it out. But they have a video on there I saw earlier. So
and I gotta jump in, Cory, and say, if people want to learn more about that trip, Paul, if you go to the Quickie Facebook page, he actually was gracious enough to do a tour. We let him go live. We gave Cory free reign of our Facebook account. Luckily, it went well. And he toured around and answered questions about it. And I was blown away by seeing the roll-in shower, the tie downs they had. So, I mean, go on over, you know, kind of a plug, I guess, for our Facebook, our social media, but go check it out because it's still on our Facebook page. It's a really cool tour that Cory took viewers on.
I love it. See, Cory, you have to get me next time when you take over the Facebook Live because I'll corrupt you. We'll get in some trouble with Angie and we'll do that. But
Okay.
but Angie,
we're gonna have to all three go to Disney together. I think that would be fun.
let's do it. And I'll tell you how I broke Monsters Inc. at California Adventure.
Oh,
I'll share that
Please.
story. Yeah, that was
Please.
pretty gnarly when I did that. But hey, thank you guys so much for everything. Make sure you go visit Angie and the crew over at the virtual booth that they have. Spend some time with them. Connect with Cory. And I really appreciate having you both. You both please take care and stay well.
yeah. Thank
We
you
will
so
try. Thanks,
All right.
guys.
All right.
Bye.